I'm Domenico the Clario. I'm in my studio in Mildura on a Sunday morning, and this is the seventh reading of a series of readings titled To Love. The first six described a walk titled Breathing for Biagio, Walking, and the next few will describe a walk titled Walking Slowly Downhill. This seventh reading describes a space in between the two and a kind of introduction to walking slowly downhill. The seventh reading. But why does this project's title begin with To Love? Because both actions I'm describing to you today resulted in my experiencing a new kind of love. I've just read Breathing for Biagio, Walking to you, expressing a love that slowly overcame me for a person I never really knew. Its protagonist was born at least 40 years before me and died almost 50 years before I first reconnected with his story. Since its unfolding, and certainly since its completion almost 15 years ago of the second walking project I'll describe to you, Walking Slowly Downhill, I've begun to experience a kind of love for the heart of this continent. A heart unknown and I had assumed unknowable to me. A heart whose steady beating I have attempted to pretend since I was a child I could not hear, because it had been a beating I'd felt deeply afraid of, whose sounding had for 6 decades fueled my own particular anxiety. Neither is it a love I'm comfortable with or understand or have ever experienced before. Why do I believe it's love then, rather than perhaps an odd mixture of admiration, guilt, regret, longing, curiosity, even some kind of vanity? I've spent much time contemplating this question, and this is my provisional conclusion. I believe the seed for both loves was planted in me the moment I saw the flat grey limestone monotones of the Australian coast in August 1956 as my migrant ship approached the dock in Fremantle Harbour. I should have said our migrant ship. I was travelling with my parents and my sister. It was at that moment that I was gripped by the unreasoned fear children feel at the sight and sound of the great unknown. And it was at that moment that Biagio also began to weep as he looked on with me onto the limestone coastline. His tears might have been tears of relief to see land after 43 days at sea. My tears were caused by an anxiety I couldn't decipher, but I knew that then that earth and water would never be the same again, either for me or for Biagio. I've recently come to know that the Noongar name for Fremantle is Wyalup, which means the place of crying. The Noongar is the name of the First Nations people who populate that part of Australia, have since time immemorial. The Whadjuk people in ancient times, who include the Noongar people, gathered here beside the limestone mouth of the Swan River to weep for the dead. Great tides of tears inundated the land and formed the current geological realities at the point where the Swan releases its waters into the Indian Ocean. The subtle influence of whatever came over me in July 1956, at the moment I saw the limestone coast, immediately begins to thrive rhizomatically through my being and has bloomed at the most unexpected times in the strangest of circumstances, with the oddest of oddly anxious flora. But it's a flora that has resisted my every attempt to uproot it, to deprive it of nutrients, to snip it at its base. It's here in me still. And so is the story of Biagio, alive and well. And so I've reasoned in my own particular way that these must be stories of love, about love, because in the end, the survival of their essence in me could only have depended on love as the nutrient that's kept them breathing and blooming all this time. What else could do it? And so at first with reticence and now with the humble acceptance of the skeptic who's been shown the incontrovertible evidence that confirms the error of his ways, I will share the stories that describe this love with deep gratitude for the revelations they have gifted me with. And then I go on to begin to describe walking slowly downhill, but I will leave that for the next reading, for the 8th reading, which I will offer you in the next couple of days. Thank you for listening, and I hope it's been of interest to you, this account of these walks. See you soon. Bye.